They didn't have Michelin stars. They didn't study food science. They didn't read journals or research papers. But long before modern kitchens, equipped with sous vide machines and fancy temperature probes, there were kitchens filled with intuition, experience, and hard-earned wisdom passed down through generations. African-American grandmothers in the 1960s understood food in ways that modern science only began to validate decades later. Welcome to The Lost Taste, where forgotten techniques, culinary brilliance, and survival know-how meet. Today, we're uncovering 15 African-American cooking tricks grandmothers used in the 1960s, long before science approved them. These are techniques born of necessity and perfected through trial, taste, and tradition. They made food more flavorful, more digestible, and sometimes even healthier, without textbooks, without labs, and without any formal study. Stick with me till the end, and you'll start to see why modern chefs and food scientists are just catching up to what elders knew all along. If you love deep food history and ancestral wisdom, hit that like button and subscribe now because these lessons are timeless. Curing cast iron with bacon grease. The iconic cast iron skillet was a staple in every African-American kitchen in the 1960s. It wasn't pre-seasoned by a factory, it was seasoned by hand, usually with bacon grease or rendered pork fat. You'd fry bacon or fat back first in a new skillet, then rub that hot grease all over the surface. What most cooks didn't understand then, but what science confirms now, is that the heat and fat caused polymerization. The fats bonded with the metal surface to create a natural non-stick layer. This made the pan rust-proof and gave food an incomparable sear. Today, chefs talk about seasoning cast iron like it's a new art form, but grandmothers mastered it because they had to. Their skillets were heirlooms because they were cared for with love and technique, not manuals. Using vinegar to tenderize meat. Meat wasn't always tender, especially cheap cuts like shoulder, brisket, or shank. Instead of expensive marinades or enzymes, Grandma would reach for plain distilled vinegar, apple cider vinegar, or even sweet vinegar. A long soak in vinegar before cooking didn't just add flavor. The acid broke down muscle fibers and connective tissue, making meat softer and more palatable. Modern food science now explains how acidity denatures proteins, transforming tough meat into fork-tender goodness. But back in the day, it was just what you did when the butcher's leftovers were all you had. Cold water, cornbread for digestion. You might think cornmeal belongs in a skillet, but some grandmothers mixed cornmeal only with cold water to make a simple, dense cornbread. They insisted it settled the stomach better than versions made with milk or eggs. Today we know that cold water slows starch gelatinization and reduces rapid rises in blood sugar, which can ease digestion for some people. This made it easier on sensitive stomachs after heavy meals or during family gatherings that started at sunrise and ended at sunset. Boiling collard greens with baking soda, carefully. Greens are abundant, healthy, and cheap, but tough and bitter without the right technique. A pinch of baking soda in the boiling water tenderized tough leaves by breaking down cellulose. Too much, and the greens turned into a mushy disappointment. But just the right tiny amount neutralized bitterness, reduced cooking time, and left the greens soft but intact. Modern science tells us that baking soda raises pH and speeds the breakdown of plant fibers. Yet grandmas invented the trick through experience, not lab experiments. Using salt pork or fatback in beans. When black-eyed peas, pinto, or kidney beans were on the stove, Grandma would often add a piece of salt pork or fatback. That wasn't just for flavor. The salt helped the beans hold their shape instead of turning to mush, and the rendered fat gave richness that clung to every bean. Today's chefs talk about umami and mouthfeel, but in the 1960s, African-American cooks just knew that beans cooked with salt pork were more satisfying, more filling, and carried deeper flavor. It was a way to add protein and preserve food at the same time. Letting cornmeal sit overnight. When making hush puppies or cornbread batter, some grandmothers mixed the cornmeal and water, or buttermilk, and simply let it rest overnight. They'd tell you it tasted better in the morning. Modern food science confirms this improves hydration, allows grain enzymes to work on the batter, and develops better flavor through natural fermentation. The result is a deeper, more nuanced taste. This was instinctive wisdom, long before people measured pH levels or enzyme activity. Double seasoning fried chicken. While most people dredged chicken in seasoned flour and fried it once, grandmothers had a trick: season it again right after it came out of the hot oil, while it was still sizzling. The residual heat helped lock the second layer of seasoning into the crust. Today's science backs this technique. Seasoning hot, oily food enhances volatile aromatic compounds, releasing layers of flavor. But in the 1960s, it was just what worked. No food chemistry required. Saving bacon grease in a coffee can. In every black household, you'd find a coffee can filled with strained bacon grease on the back of the stove or in the fridge. Far from waste, it was liquid gold. Used for frying okra, cornbread, greens, or even for rubbing into cast iron, this fat was shelf-stable when strained and taught kids early that fat carries flavor. Modern chefs now praise good fat and render their own, but back then it was a kitchen essential. Cheap, delicious, and versatile. Soaking liver in milk for milder flavor. Liver is nutrient-dense, but can have a metallic, intense flavor. Some grandmothers soaked liver in milk for an hour or more before cooking. The proteins and fats in the milk bound to blood traces and reduced bitterness dramatically. Today, food science recognizes that soaking in dairy can mellow strong flavors. But in the 1960s, this trick was learned through generations of "this is how we always did it," using onion skins for broth color and antioxidants. Never peel an onion and throw the skins away. Grandmothers saved onion skins in a jar and simmered them with rice or soups or stocks to add a rich amber hue and subtle flavor. Later research shows that onion skins contain quercetin and other antioxidant compounds, natural nutrients often lost in modern processing. What was once a pantry trick now has scientific validation. Buttermilk as a brine. Soaking chicken or pork in buttermilk wasn't just tradition, it was tenderizing science. The lactic acid in buttermilk breaks down proteins gently, making meat more tender and creating a tangy base for crispy fried coatings. Today, buttermilk brines are a staple in culinary schools for juicy fried chicken, but grandmas were doing it decades earlier because they knew it worked, adding a pinch of sugar to greens or beans, not to make everything sweet, but to balance bitterness. A tiny pinch of sugar in collard greens or in long-simmered beans helped round out bitter compounds. Modern science understands how sugar balances bitter and acidic flavors by activating different taste receptors. But in black kitchens, this was intuitive seasoning, not chemistry. Toasting flour before gravy. Some grandmothers toasted flour in a dry skillet before adding fat to make gravy. This added a nuttier, deeper flavor and helped the gravy brown without burning. Today's classic French cuisine calls this a brown roux, essential for gumbo and other rich stews. But long before culinary schools talked about roux, black grandmas were making toast before gravy for flavor complexity, using apple cider vinegar in everything. In greens, marinades, and glazes, apple cider vinegar was used not just for acidity, but to brighten flavors and balance richness. Modern chefs call this acidity balance, and nutrition science explores how vinegar enhances flavor perception. Grandma didn't need research. She knew a splash of vinegar transformed a dish. Boiling ham hocks with beans or greens for gelatin and body. Ham hocks weren't just flavor bombs. The connective tissues and skin released gelatin when simmered long and slow, creating body in soups and stews that would otherwise be thin. Today's chefs chase mouthfeel and collagen for texture, but back then, a pot of beans and ham hocks delivered richness, nutrition, and satisfaction. These techniques were more than survival tricks. They were expressions of culture, economy, and taste. They taught generations how to make less taste like more, how to use every part of an ingredient, and how to respect the food on the table. Modern food science may explain why these tricks work, but African-American grandmothers knew they worked through experience, through meals shared around kitchen tables, and through a lifetime of feeding families with what they had. Which of these techniques do you still use in your kitchen? Or which one surprised you the most? Share your answers in the comments below and tell us whose kitchen you learned it in. If you learned something new today, hit that like button, subscribe to The Lost Taste, and share this video with someone who loves food history as much as you do. And before we go, remember, this is The Lost Taste, where the wisdom of the past becomes nourishment for the present. These tricks weren't just clever, they were necessary. They were born of love, scarcity, and a powerful understanding of food that science is still catching up to today. If you decide to try any of these techniques, adapt them safely to your own kitchen and tastes. Thanks for watching. Keep exploring, keep tasting, and keep honoring the lessons whispered from Grandma's stove. Stay hungry for history, and we'll see you in the next video on The Lost Taste.